All right, so one thing that the left is really good at is ignoring the many glaring contradictions of their ideologies. We see this constantly with climate change and green energy proposals. The mission to help keep the planet clean of pollution has been fully corrupted by massive corporations, special interests, and political ideologues who've realized that they can scare people into submission and force free societies to comply with what they want. If people think the world is going to end, they'll let you control them. They hide this from us, of course, what they're really doing, but there are moments when their true motivations are exposed. On Monday, a massive humpback whale washed up on a Long Island beach. The whale was dead when it was found. It's a sad sight. There was no apparent trauma. Scientists are still trying to figure out exactly what killed this huge, beautiful animal. But this was at least the 10th whale to wash up on the shores of New Jersey and New York since December. 10 in just this little area of the North Atlantic. Humpback whales are some of the most beautiful animals in the world. Watching these massive mammals breach is described as a life-changing experience. You can see some video here. An incredible spectacle of nature, and it's becoming more clear that the left's new religion of climate change is killing them, and killing them rather quickly. Wind farms, to be precise, are what we're talking about, which have long been a threat to wildlife, from Politico, in fact. The deaths are happening as pre-construction work ramps up on offshore wind farms, which are a key part of the nation and New Jersey's climate change strategy. So offshore wind power is a key pillar in Biden's mission to go green, of course, which is a major power play and financial scheme for Democrats and their donors. Just take a listen.
My administration said bold targets to start with, 30 gigawatts by 2030. That's 10 million homes. 10 million homes, offshore wind. Ports turned back into economic engines.
So in New Jersey, Democrat Governor Phil Murphy set a statewide target of generating 11 gigawatts of offshore wind power by 2040. So obviously this story, what's happening to the whales, is not at all good for the cause. And it's a story that'll be suppressed as much as possible. But unfortunately, that's not been easy to do. A dozen New Jersey mayors are now calling for an immediate moratorium on offshore wind energy development until federal and state scientists can assure the public that ocean noise related to underwater seabed mapping, soil borings, and other turbine construction activities poses no threat to whales. Now, if you think like me, you wonder how much you want to bet that those scientists find no conclusive evidence that wind farms are a threat to the whale population, because they always seem to get the result that they want. And even if the investigation did find harm, which I'd say there's a small chance it does, you also wonder, would it really even change anything? Our climate overlords have already moved their disciples past the annoying little fact that the process of making car batteries is horrific for the environment, and that African slaves, many of them children, are digging up your next electric vehicle battery as we speak. Now, if you can ignore something that bad in the fight for climate change, you can ignore almost anything. What's a few thousand dead whales matter at that point? But it should matter a lot. Humpback whales are a critical part of the ocean's ecosystem, and if they're dying, you start to wonder what else down there is dying. All very inconvenient questions nobody in government wants to hear, of course, but they sure cared a lot about whales when they started a war against North Atlantic lobstermen. If you remember this story, the Biden administration more than willing to eviscerate the Maine lobster industry almost in its entirety in order to save the right whale. Why do they care so much about the right whale? There's no actual evidence lobstering is actually killing right whales. The administration cherry-picking data to justify its assault on the lobster industry, imposing regulations that would force the Maine lobster industry to reduce their output by a staggering 90%, killing countless businesses, no doubt. Despite the fact that in the last 18 years, not one right whale has been killed by Maine lobster gear, and there have only been 2 entanglements. Back in September, I spoke to Maine lobsterman Jason Joyce about why he thinks the administration cares that only 2 right whales have been entangled in a number of years in nets.
They want to eventually have thousands of offshore windmills off the East Coast and roughly around 1,000 in the Gulf of Maine, which would take a long time for them to do, but it would be between 20 and 40 miles offshore. That's where the lobster fishermen are at. We're the only stakeholder that's there. If we're eliminated because we are loud, but we are environmentally aware of what's going on.
Yep.
And so we're the only ones objecting to this. All
want-
of the environmental groups have no objection to it whatsoever.
No. So obviously, it's not about whales at all. It's about an agenda. They're willing to sacrifice as many humpbacks as it takes to get their agenda done. But if there's one right whale hurt, then when it goes the other way, obviously they're going to protect that right whale with everything that they got. They want to get rid of the lobstermen. They don't care about them. So they use whales when it's convenient for them, and they kill them when it's convenient for them. You start to see how it works. There's always a real reason for the decisions that government makes. Now, you take that logic and you extrapolate it out, and you realize that windmills and solar have really nothing to do with protecting the planet anymore. Of course, it's always about money and power, like it always is. Bonnie Brady is an executive director of the Long Island Commercial Fishing Association, and she joins us now. Bonnie, thanks so much for coming on. You have a theory about exactly what's happening to these whales. You know, I think those are some of the most beautiful animals on Earth. They're certainly some of the biggest. What exactly is happening to them?
Hi, thanks so much for having me. What we need to have a federal investigation about is that the surveying, basically the mapping of the ocean floor that is done by these survey boats, they have certain low frequency sound that they utilize for various machinery that we believe is impeding the whale's ability to hear, breed, feed, and also communicate. It's on the same frequency, and what has been happening is that we already know it's considered a level B harassment. I'm sure you've heard the federal government going, we have not authorized any type of injury. They've authorized level B takes, which includes the ability to harass these animals. However, it also includes something called temporary temporal shifts in hearing. That's temporary deafness. So what we think is happening is that the amount of survey boats they have out there, they've got over 20 wind energy areas that are presently in various forms of surveying, leasing these areas. These boats are 240, 260 feet using this equipment, and they're moving sometimes up to 70 kilometers in a day. They're not sitting still. So the sparkers, the boomers, and the chirps that are used are probably, and I'm making this assumption because we need to get the information, affecting these whales so they cannot, they normally, because of the sound, they don't know what's going on. And then if they wind up being temporarily deaf and a ship hits them, it's a ship strike. Part of the problem is the whales that are showing up, they're not.
Can I ask you? Yeah. I just want to interrupt that. Sorry to interrupt, but it's 10 whales, from what we understand, in New Jersey and New York, or Long Island, New York, just in the last couple months, it sounds like. How big of an increase is that to see that many dead whales? It seems like a beached whale or a dead whale on a beach is not a very frequent occurrence. I haven't never seen one live.
Well, what they call the unusual mortality event, or UME, for humpbacks began in 2016. What the feds have said is, oh no, this unusual mortality event, it predates survey work. That's a lie. U.S. Wind did surveys in 2015 and in 2016. Bay State Wind, which was owned by Dong Energy, which is Ørsted, was also doing surveys in 2016. And between 2014 and 16, the Block Island Wind Farm was being constructed along with its cable. So we know the sounds were out there then. About the same time, there was also a UME for minke whales and also for the North Atlantic right whale. They are all baleen whales, which are all whales that hear in low frequencies. Other whales that also on the low frequency are sperm whales. 2 of those landed, one in New York, I believe, and one in New Jersey. There was a SEI.
So it seems like it seems you're fairly certain that that's what's going on here. I have to cut it there because we're low on time, but just real quick, is that 75, 90% sure, your theory?
What we need is Congressman Van Drew and Congressman Harris have requested a federal investigation. It's the only way we can get our hands on the necropsies, see what's being done,
Got it.
talk to the survey boats, put them on pause, interview the protected species observers, have them open up their logs. We need transparency and we need oversight, and we need it now because we can't afford to have any more dead whales.
What a story. Bonnie, Brady, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me.